Listen to the crowd here in the background. Nebraska. They grab the crown, and if the crown fits, wear it, my boys. There's the horn. There's the game. Husker hoops. College basketball royalty wins the crown over UCF. Final score, Huskers 77, UCF 66.
Nebraska caps what could have been a disappointing season with a crown championship in Las Vegas, their first postseason title since the 1996 NIT. Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Scarlet Shoot-Around podcast, presented, as always, by our friends at Tax and Business Consultants. As we record this today on Tax Day, April 15th, it may be a little bit too late to save yourself from Uncle Sam penalties, but maybe if you shoot them an email, you can get an extension potentially with TBC. But make sure to visit them for beyond just taxes, some business consulting as well at www.tbc.tax. Mike, I tell you what, again, this could have been a really disappointing season. I know there were a lot of people up there that were semi-upset that Nebraska decided to play in the ground for portal reasons and what have you. But tell you what, when they win the thing, I don't know how much complaining you can do.
Yeah, and I feel like I made my position abundantly clear in the previous episode. Nebraska does not know postseason success whatsoever beyond the NCAA tournament, right? As you just mentioned, had not won a postseason tournament this millennium, right? So let's not take it for granted. This was special. I'm really, really happy for the guys. There's not a lot of teams that can say they ended their season on a win, and I think that's something to hang their hat on.
So we have two games to catch everybody up on. So we're going to start with a semi-quick Boise State recap, Mike, where Juwan Gary was the star of the show, going for 21 and 9 on 7 of 12 shooting, 4 of 4 from deep, 3 of 3 from the line with 3 blocks added to his line. Mike, his offensive rating of 166 was his second best performance of the year, and he was also flanked by star Bryce Williams, who went for 14, 5, and 6, going 4 of 8 from the field, 1 of 2 from deep, 5 of 6 from the line. And his 6 assists tied him for his season high, and he played a little bit of a different role in this game, Mike.
Yeah, not the typical scoring performance we saw from Bryce. Juwan leading the team, as you mentioned, with 21 points. Only 3 guys in triple digits, the other being Sam Hoiberg, who went 3 for 6 from the field, hit 2 of his 4 3-point attempts, and converted 2 of 3 from the line. But beyond that, it was really just team contribution. Outside of the starters from the bench, we got 8 from Connor Sejan, 8 from Aaron Eulis, 6 from Andrew Morgan, and 4 from Braxton Mia. Just a great all-around bench performance in this one against the Broncos from the Huskers reserves.
Expanding on that bench play, Nebraska beat Boise State in that semifinal game in bench points 26-12, while the Broncos had 9 players play 10-plus minutes. As you mentioned, Sam Hoiberg, he scored in double digits for the second time this year with a plus-minus of plus 11, which was the second best on the team in this game. Aaron Eulis, who you also mentioned, with 8 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, hit 2 of 3 from deep, and that was his first game hitting multiple threes, Mike, since January 29th. Of 2023. And I tell you what, when things like that are happening, a little bit of luck never hurts. As Shot Quality had a projected final score of 75-75. Now, those of you that aren't familiar, it's an online program, very deep in analytics, that tells you, what the outcome should have been based on who was shooting the shot, how tight the defense was, that kind of thing. They thought the game should have been a lot closer based on the quality of shots that Nebraska had. But in this game, again, Mike, Nebraska made some shots that they normally wouldn't. That said, I don't think anyone's apologizing for it.
And no, we shouldn't be, because that's basketball, right? Sometimes you get lucky, you hit shots that you don't normally see. Happy to see, as you mentioned, Aaron Eulis hitting a couple of threes. That's, something that we talked about not seeing very often. Juwan Gary going 4 for 4 from beyond the arc. That's not typically his game either, right? Sam Hoiberg, 2 for 4. All around, the team shot really, really well, especially beyond the arc. 12 of 19, shooting 63% from beyond the arc. That's not the Nebraska team we saw all season. It was good to see that team come out in this one. And we can't mention that without Cale Jacobson in the previous episode. He also added 2 threes. Those were his only field goal makes. He missed his lone 2-point attempt. Another great game by Cale, playing 21 minutes. He's definitely getting starter minutes. Overall, another great performance from a guy who's really capitalizing on his opportunity.
And we talked about it on the prior episode we did when Nebraska made the semifinals of the Crown, that Cale Jacobson is turning into a pretty serious contributor. And we're not going to go too deep into roster and all that kind of stuff for next year, as we'll save that for maybe another podcast in the future. But very happy to have Cale Jacobson back for next year, and I think he will play some kind of role in next year's rotation. But in this one, Mike, rounding it out, Tyson Degenhart, Boise State's star, went for 26, 8, and 2, going 9 of 17 from the field, 4 of 9 from deep, adding 2 steals. Played very well as we expected, but did not have the help. And a big key to that, Mike, was Nebraska matching Boise State on the offensive glass, as Boise, who led the Mountain West in offensive rebounding, only tied Nebraska on the offensive glass 11-11. Wrapping up this game, Nebraska shoots 46% from the field on 26 of 56, 63% from deep on 12 of 19, which was a season high, 83% from the line, 15 of 18, and the Huskers have 18 assists to 11 turnovers as they hold Boise State to 40% shooting from the field, 33% from deep, 91% from the line on 10 of 11, but the Broncos only have 14 assists to 9 turnovers. And that semifinal win, Mike, propelled Nebraska to a date with UCF in the championship the next day, which was led by, as we always say, Bryce Williams and Juwan Gary. But how about Connor Esijan in this one, Mike, who went for 21, 4, and 2, going 8 of 16 from the field, 4 of 8 from deep, 1 of 3 from the line while adding 1 steal. He erupted for 14 second-half points and led the charge during the Huskers' second-half comeback.
And I think the biggest thing that you mentioned there, you said 8 of 16 from the field, 4 of 8 inside the arc for Connor. If he develops a mid-range game, if he gets a more consistent 2-point jumper, that really takes his game to the next level, because suddenly he has a way to punish defenses when they close out aggressively against him. And you just mentioned, we're not going to talk too much about roster next year, but Connor's coming back, and hopefully that's a development that we can see continue through this offseason going into next season, kind of rounding out his scoring ability. But, we can't talk about this one without the two super seniors that we've both come to know and love. Bryce Williams, 21 points, 6 of 14 from the field, 3 of 8 from beyond the arc, 6 of 8 from the free throw line. And Juwan Gary, who went out, banged his head. He was out for a while, but he came back in. And when he came in, the energy completely shifted for this Husker squad. He finished with 20 points, going 8 for 15 from the field, 1 of 3 from beyond the arc, made all 3 of his free throws. Added 8 rebounds to that total as well, and 2 steals. So really, like I said, the energy switched immensely when Juwan came back onto the floor from his visit to the locker room.
And not just in this game, let alone the second half, but Juwan Gary has taken his game to new heights since March, as he has had 17 or more points in all of the last 7 games on his way to earning the Crown MVP award. Bryce Williams, in his 21-point effort, also secured him the Nebraska single-season scoring record. Fred Hoiberg talked about the importance of the success Nebraska had in this Crown tournament and what it means for the seniors.
But yeah, it was, listen, we didn't get the goal that we wanted for playing in the NCAA tournament, but we made the most of it and came out here focused and, stayed together as a group and played some pretty darn good basketball. And, hopefully give us some momentum heading into next season. And I think the experience of playing in a postseason event like this will help everybody that will be back on our roster next year. I'm proud of these 2 guys that won't be here next year for what they did for our program, first of all, and how they helped themselves by playing in this event. Just couldn't be more proud of the guys for how this thing ended. And, it's a lot better feeling than when we were sitting at home on whatever that last game against Iowa was, when you didn't know what was going to happen.
And Fred mentioned how this team came together, and man, Mike, in this finale, did they ever, as the Huskers played like a very tight-knit team while UCF did not, as Nebraska led the Knights in assists 20-8 and won the turnover battle against UCF 12-9. But the story of this game, Mike, was Nebraska getting killed on a huge run and then answering with a huge run of their own, as UCF went on an unbelievable 23-2 run from the 4:58 mark of the first half to the 14:55 mark of the second half on their way to building a 14-point lead. But as we've seen a couple different times this year, Nebraska responded with a 24-3 run of their own from that same 14:55 mark of the second half to the 7:27 mark to build a 7-point lead. Mike, we talked about how this team has struggled out of the gate all season, but there have been more than a couple instances of Nebraska answering the call and going on these second half runs.
Yeah, it's not good for my heart health to be a second half team, but unfortunately that's exactly what this team turned out to be. They played UCF close, obviously, in the first half, 35-35 at the end of the half there. It was a little disappointing, right? The Huskers had a 12-point lead with 10 and a half minutes left in the first half there and just slowly let UCF claw their way back in. And I think when you look at that middle 15 to 20 minutes there of the game, UCF absolutely won that, no question about it. But the wherewithal in this team, as I mentioned, felt like Juwan and Bryce were not going to go out with a loss. I think that was on top of their mind. They really pulled the team with them. And as you mentioned, it really did look like the Huskers playing as a team. Contributions from everywhere. We already mentioned Connor Esijan scoring, but Sam Hoiberg, while he did not score a single point in this game, was second on the team in box score plus minus at plus 16. Very, very difficult to have a plus 16 rating in your box score when you do not score a single point. Sam pulled down 3 rebounds, 7 assists, 0 turnovers, 2 steals. He did a great job guarding Darius Johnson, who, as they mentioned on the broadcast, had a bit of a hamstring issue, but still holding a guy that went for 40 points in the previous game to only 4. You can't say enough about the job Sam Hoiberg did. But again, it's not just 1, 2, or 3 guys. It was an entire team effort, and really great to see them play that way in the last game of the season.
And Sam Hoiberg definitely helped Nebraska's defensive charge against the Knights, as the UCF ranked 11th nationally in tempo, as we talked about on the Twitter preview, but Nebraska held them to only 2 fast break points in this championship game, as the Knights had 26, 10, and 16 transition points over their last 3 games. So very impressive for the Nebraska defense. We can't round this out without talking about Cale Jacobson again, who went for 5 points, 6 rebounds, 1 assist, going 2 of 4 from the field, only making 1, but his only lone 3-point attempt, while adding 1 block and 1 steal. But Mike, the story of his championship game was making the 2 shots of his career in the second half to protect Nebraska's late lead.
Shots of his career so far. As he mentioned, he's going to be coming back next year. It'd be huge to see more of that from Cale, that shot-making ability, that, clutch. You need a guy that can be able to score buckets down the stretch, and maybe it's not always going to be Cale Jacobson, but it's nice to see him show that in this one, because, going into next season without a Bryce Williams type guy, I think it is going to have to be a little bit more of a team effort. And again, not going to get too much into roster construction now, but it is great to see a little bit of that from Cale. Know that he's somebody that's trustworthy, that you can lean on going into next year.
Rounding out the championship recap, Nebraska shoots 48% from the field on 29 of 61, 43% from deep on 9 of 21. Very poor for this Husker team, as they go 59% from the free throw line on 10 of 17, but the Huskers do have 20 assists to only 9 turnovers, while holding UCF to 40% from the field, 24% from deep on 7 of 29, 83% from the line, and the Knights only have 8 assists to 12 turnovers. A lot of celebratory tweets on the other side of this, Mike. I can't wait to get into them. We'll get to that on the other side of the break.
Hey, Nebraska fans, April is here, and, well, as of today, so are your taxes. And while the Husker season and tax season is over, make sure you still reach out to tax and business consultants with locations in Blair, Columbus, and Lyons. They've got you covered not only with expert tax planning, but also bookkeeping and payroll services. So whether you're a small business owner or managing your personal taxes, let them take care of the numbers so you can focus on what really counts. Visit www.tbc.tax today and score a win for your financial future.
You are listening to the Scarlet Shoot-Around Podcast.
Welcome back into the Scarlet Shoot-Around Podcast, presented as always by our friends Tax and Business Consultants. Mike, we had to come up with the last-second ad read, as tax season is now officially over, unless you filed an extension. But again, they expand far beyond just tax work, as they can help you with bookkeeping and payroll as well.
Always thanks to them for everything they did for us this season. And as you mentioned, it's not just taxes that they take care of. They do a lot of stuff, so be sure to reach out to them. Coming up on next season, it'll be here before you know it. So keep them in the back of your mind when that comes around as well.
So let's get into it, Mike. We call this segment Let's Hear From You, where we post a tweet at the final buzzer of every game asking Husker fans what their thoughts were on each win and each loss. We have a couple from the Boise game that we want to get to before we get to UCF, so we'll start with Kyle Quinn, who says it was a well-balanced W, proud of this team's resolve through the tournament. And Bode Sukup's mustache, it might be Bodie, I'm not quite sure. Super happy with our performance. End of the season left a terrible taste in my mouth, but this tournament has made me so much happier. Bryce and Gary balling out, Cale becoming a rising threat, CEO had a big game, and a bunch more of our guys looking great. Gonna miss this team. And Mike, I think there are a lot of things that we are gonna miss about this team, most specifically the leadership of Bryce and Juwan through, maybe a couple losing streaks, but a really great start to the year, really great end to the year, and everything in between. But guys like Bryce Williams and Juwan Gary really just do not come through programs very often, so those two will be dearly missed.
They absolutely will, and probably talk about it here in the championship tweet section. But it was, emotional to see them in that final game. I was traveling for work, so I didn't actually get to watch it live. But watching the recap, even knowing the end result, it was still emotional to watch those guys. very, very happy once again that they could go out on top. That's not something a lot of people can say for their college career, right? That you went out as a winner. Definitely a special moment for them. Third year midlife crisis said, Kale being the difference this tournament wasn't on my bingo card, but he pushes the tempo and his basketball IQ is very high. He makes us better. And Sam Hoiberg fan said, championship bound. Once again, a great showing by Kale and Sam. Exciting potential Scott Frost revenge matchup. As we do know, UCF won a late overtime game on that semifinal Saturday going into that championship Sunday. So hopefully Sam Hoiberg fan was happy with the Scott Frost Bowl, as we could call it. But I do just want to touch again on Kale and his performance throughout this whole tournament. And while maybe his performance in the championship outside of the two massive shots he hit wasn't incredible, I think, what Midlife Crisis had to say about his basketball IQ being high, you listen to Fred and he has nothing but praise for Kale. He mentions, he worked the entire year. Even when he's on the bench, he's mentally locked in. He's taking mental reps, focusing on what the other team's doing. He's calling out other teams' plays. So that point is very accurate, high basketball IQ, and especially in collegiate basketball, that can take you very, very far, putting yourself and your teammates in the right position, and there's just not enough that can be said about that.
And talking about Kale and Sam and some of the other walk-ons, now we're transitioning into what most people think, and there's nothing technically official yet as we record this, but where we're going to move to, I think it's 15 roster spots with no scholarship/walk-on difference. You just get 15 guys point blank period. So it's going to be more and more important to have these kind of guys, especially in the era of NIL and the portal, that understand their role and understand what's expected of them and don't raise a fuss and don't want more shots and so on and so forth, right? So you can't say enough about Sam and Kale and some of these guys that are doing exactly what they need to do. And Kale stepping up and playing as well as he did in this tournament without Raleigh being available was unbelievable. And there are some people out there, I'm sure, that are wondering what the season could have been if Kale had played earlier in the year. And maybe that's a fair assumption and fair question, but what can you say about their effort? And we're very excited to have those two back. As now, I will say, if those guys are featured guys, we're going to have some issues, I think. But for the role that they're asked to do going into next year and what they did this year, and Sam even going back 2 years ago with the Bandamel team and Griesel and those guys, he has done everything asked of him, and he's the perfect coach's kid, if you will. And those are the kind of guys that bring the team together. Rounding it out, Dylan Stouffer says back-to-back 20-win seasons for the first time since the 90s, and people wanted Fred gone. Go win the crown, baby. Give me UCF versus Nebraska in the Scott Frost Bowl. He did get what he wanted. And Whizbang Hoops said, been arguing with fans all season who wanted Fred gone that you don't fire the guy who just gave you the best 2 years you've had in 30 years. Imagine my surprise when the last time we had back-to-back 20-win seasons was 30 years ago. And again, we've talked about this at length over the last couple episodes, especially during that losing streak to end the regular season, that Fred Hoiberg's first 3 years are really kind of chained against him, and they make his record look really bad. And anybody who's truthfully watched this program from a year-to-year basis has seen us take steps in the right direction. I think Fred has finally found a formula to win in the Big Ten. They were a couple shots away, a couple possessions away from making the tournament this year, and they still went out and won the postseason tournament. You can say what you want, that these teams weren't full strength, which is a fair assessment. You can say what you want in that Nebraska had almost everybody available. Fair assessment. Nebraska had the most people at the Crown tournament. That's a fair assessment. But all you can do is win with the situation you have. And for Nebraska to go out and win this postseason tournament with the Crown, the first ever, which who knows, this thing could expand to be, an even bigger deal down the road with the future of NIL and all that kind of stuff. There's so many unknowns, but the one known that we do have is Fred Hoiberg is on a historic run these last 2 years with Nebraska basketball.
Yeah, and I think, you have your Fred haters and your Fred truthers, and that's any fan base, right? The easiest guy to blame is the head coach, and that's why they get paid the money that they do. But I think this one, as somebody that's always kind of pumped the brakes on the Fire Fred train, it is satisfying to see them come out and win a postseason tournament. Having said that, it is the Crown. All the things you just said, Blake, there's a lot of, if you want to call them asterisks or whatever on this win. That's fine, whatever. Like I said last episode, though, Nebraska doesn't win the postseason. This is not something we do. Let's just be happy about it, and let's just go into next season with a blank slate, and then we can talk about Fred all over again next year. I'm sure we will, because we'll probably go on a big winning streak, and we'll probably have a losing streak, and we'll just rinse and repeat once again. But at least we have the inaugural crown, and they can never take that away from us. Going into this one, there was a lot of tweets there about the fans about a potential matchup with UCF. like I said, that's what we got. So now let's get into some tweets about the UCF postgame where the Huskers were able to pull out that win. Starting with R. Christopher Reed, who said, an incredibly fun experience in person. Blake, I think you would attest to that. I know you got some Crown merch. Hopefully, if we ever go to the Crown again, we can have another opportunity to go and enjoy Vegas. They said, great to see Bryce and Juwan go out with a win. Bill Duck Pussplatt said, we could probably take out Houston or Florida at this point. Gotta love the unbridled optimism of Husker fans, right? Signal Caller 99 said, love, love, love. What else needs to be said? Tenacity at its finest. Team, coach, togetherness, team win. SL Schwartz 45 said, such an amazing and deserving victory. Tears of happiness. Love watching this team play. Waffle Maple Syrup said, bring that trophy back to Lincoln. The PBA vault is a little empty. Napa Goomba said, not my first choice of postseason success, but something is better than nothing. Amazing how similar the football and men's basketball seasons transpired, which is really weird when you look back on it, right? You know, hopefully they can kind of rise to prominence together here in the next couple of years. And finally, Husker Adams said, a happy end to a disappointing season. Hopefully it's a building block for bigger postseason wins to come. And Blake, you have to love the happiness here. Obviously, everybody's happy after a win, but even more so after a championship win. I do love the point that Waffles said there about bringing the trophy back and the PBA vault's a little empty. But really, it is just so great to see all the fans kind of being very happy. I know, as we said earlier, there were some naysayers about this tournament. There's some people that were poo-pooing it and saying, it doesn't really matter. But I think overall, as a fan base, everyone's very, very happy to go out the way that we did.
And Napa Goomba and Husker Adam combined those two thoughts perfectly, I thought, as Napa again said, not my first choice of postseason success, but something is better than nothing. And then Husker Adam said it was a happy ending to a disappointing season, and hopefully it's a building block for bigger postseason wins to come. Again, you can only deal with the hand you're dealt. Everybody knows that it was a very disappointing end to the season, but the Huskers made the most of their opportunity, winning a postseason tournament. That, I was in the building as Mike talked about, and the confetti was flying as the Huskers raised a trophy. Again, first time they've raised a postseason trophy since 1996. So this is not something that happens often, and something that not only the players, but the fan base should enjoy and cherish a little bit, because again, this program is starved for any bit of success. So let's just take this and run with it. And again, going back to Adam, hopefully it's a building block for bigger postseason wins to come. A lot of people, again, were saying, well, God, Nebraska's playing in the Crown and they should be at home trying to get guys in the portal. I think we now can see with 2020 hindsight that the Crown played no issue with the Huskers getting players, as they currently are shopping for one more spot as we record this. And that might even be decided by the time that we post this. So people find a lot of ways to worry about things, and people find a lot of things to be upset about. And that's fully understandable in human nature. But try to tell everybody on this roster, again, revenue split equally. It was close to, I think, $16,000 a guy. Try to tell Juwan Gary this didn't mean something. Try to tell Sam Hoiberg this didn't mean something. Tell Bryce Williams this didn't mean something. They're one of 4 teams in the country that get to end the season with a win. That means something. And whether, you want to think that it means something or not, whether you want to hang a banner or not, it means a lot to the guys, and they proved it by their play on the court. So very happy with how it ended for them. Verbose Husker said, man, this team, these seniors deserved so much. It might be a hot take, but I think this is a better ending for them than losing in the first round or maybe even winning in Dayton. Not many teams get to finish their season with a win. Enjoy it, Nebrasketball fans. Dylan Stouffer says, sure, the Crown wasn't loaded, but winning this tournament was the best thing to happen for this program aside from winning a March Madness game. TV exposure, sending seniors out the right way, winning 20-plus games. Bryce gets the single-season point leader record and $300,000 for NIL. Program changing. And Husker Focus said, this was an incredible emotional week for this program. Was very hesitant about the team accepting this experience, but they said they weren't ready to be done yet and showed it. Making runs like this builds culture, regardless of what you think about the Crown. Back-to-back 20-win seasons. And I think culture is the key word with this, Mike, as again, it started with Bandamel and Griesel and that crop of guys that still maybe had a disappointing season, frankly didn't even get a berth into the NIT, but it was the first inkling of success that Fred Hoiberg had in Nebraska. And as we saw, that turned into an NCAA tournament berth the next year. Coming into this year, there was a high expectation that this team, a lot of people thought the roster was maybe even better coming into the year than it was for the NCAA tournament team the year prior. Didn't end up that way, but I think it's very clear to everyone now that watches this team on a game-to-game basis that a culture has been built and established, and Fred is recruiting through the portal and in the high school ranks to fit that culture.
It's tough, or it can be tough, I should say, to talk about culture, especially in the era of the portal and basically unlimited free agency, whatever. But there's one constant, and that's having a winning culture, right? You look at any good teams have to learn how to win. And then the tweet that we talked to, or that I went over earlier, that said, it's kind of crazy how the Husker football team and the basketball team kind of mirrored each other this year, right? I think those teams are both coming from a very similar place where there's not a culture of success, of winning. And trying to build that from the ground up does take time. And I think we're seeing the fruits of that, if we want to focus on basketball specifically right now, seeing the fruits of that back-to-back 20-win seasons. As we said, maybe it's not the postseason we were looking for. You can look down your nose on it all you want. But at the end of the day, like Blake said, there's only 4 teams that can say they ended their season with a win. And that says something. And I think that kind of once again raises the bar a little bit for us. The expectation going in this year was NCAA tournament, right? Now going into next season, what are the expectations going to be? We'll have to look at the roster and everything. But now there is a culture, a little bit of winning, a postseason title win, an in-season tournament win with the Diamond Hand Classic. All these things, these little building steps, you raise the floor and eventually that raises the ceiling, right? And I think we're seeing that live right now. And it's a great time to tune in if you're a Husker fan. It hasn't been this good in a long, long time. Drew Urban said, awesome tournament, great job Huskers, and thanks to the seniors. Great decision playing in this event and a great showing. This will look great in the trophy case. What a fun ride this season has been, and thank you Scarlet Shoot-Around for being there every step of the way. We always love the fan support and the fan love. That means a lot to both Blake and I. I always say, it's funny to think 2 buddies just talking about probably the worst power basketball team in the country can actually have a little bit of support, but we never, knew there'd be so much of it. So always thankful for that. Lance Clausen said, great win. Glad to see a happy ending for roller coaster season. Bryce and Gary are good ballers, great men, and grateful they are Huskers. Ron Barker said, happy for them. Glad they got to earn some money, especially good to see the Gary and Williams get good exposure and went out on a 4-game winning streak. And finally, Tyler Worrell said, so happy for the fellas. I get we've been frustrated at points this season, but what a way for Bryce and Jawan to go out, GBR. And we touched on it earlier, Blake. You mentioned Bryce Williams setting the all-time single-season point record. Jawan Gary getting the crown MVP. I mean, what better way for these 2 transfers? They didn't come up through high school. They didn't sit here, but they came in. We talk about culture a lot, and these guys were the culture of this team the last couple of years. Between Bryce Williams being an absolute scorer, an absolute bucket, 3 levels. He can take anybody. He's got the size to beat guards. He's got the quickness to beat bigs. I mean, he's a mismatch for anybody. And then Jawan Gary, we knew him last year as the glue guy, just a defensive first guy, always being in the right position, guard anybody on the floor. To this year, as Blake mentioned, upping his offensive game, got asked to take on a role as kind of the secondary scorer with Casey no longer being on the team. And he completely answered, especially in this postseason run. So fantastic way for these 2 seniors to go out. I know, in my mind, they're going to be legends as far as what the Husker basketball program is. Blake's exactly right. There's not very often you get 2 guys of that quality come through your program, especially at the same time, and forever going to be thankful for them and what they did for this program.
And they were a part of, again, what we just talked about, the continued culture that Fred Hoiberg has built with this team over the past 3 years. But the biggest thing to me, again, is that those guys were the identity of this year's team and a big part of last year's team as well, which obviously goes without saying. But that's such a rarer and rarer thing to come across, especially now in the age of the portal, where a lot of teams are flipping their entire roster every year. And when you're in a spot like Nebraska is, where you don't have a ton of NIL money, you're semi-competitive in the Big Ten when it comes to NIL budgets and what have you. You don't find a lot of guys that are willing to stay around. Number 1, a losing program in general. Number 2, a coach that has a losing record at the losing program. And number 3, a program that's not going to pay you top dollar. So it's really cool to see guys like that, especially a guy who led the Big Ten in scoring in Bryce Williams, come back when he could have left and got an absolute bag. And Jawan Gary came back and he could have gotten an absolute bag in the portal. Matter of fact, he could have probably went back to Bama and doubled his salary. So it's so good to see guys stick around in the program, especially the focal points, and put the program over the dollar sign, which I think, again, is more of a fleeting thing as we continue down this transfer portal era. There's a whole nother conversation, again, which we kind of talked about with building contracts and stuff like that, but not the point in this talk. It's simply that we're really happy those guys recommitted to the program and had maybe not a legendary season, but a legendary finish to the season, at least in terms of Husker standards. The Chadster said, also, Nebraska is now the only team to ever win both the NIT and Crown postseason tournaments in college basketball. I think I'm happy about that. Kyle Quinn said, they can never take the crown from us. Thank you for everything, Bryce, Juwan, and every senior on the roster. Go Big Red. Matt Buscher says, you cannot let Juwan Gary bleed his own blood and get away with it. Crown us, referencing when Juwan left after getting hit in the head. Michael Dunford said, honestly, I was surprised how much I got emotionally invested in it. Sunday's game was a true roller coaster, put me in a great mood for the rest of Sunday that carried over to today. And I think that's what the common sentiment was for a lot of the fan base, Mike, in that I remember watching that Arizona State game with a buddy, and I was like, I'm trying to get into it. I want them to win and stuff like that. But as Nebraska continued to win, they beat Georgetown. All of a sudden, it's like, well, they're in the semifinals for this thing. They're starting to play for some money now. I took the direct Frontier flight midday Friday to be able to get to the game. I think I touched ground in Vegas at like midnight on Saturday for the semifinal game and ran over to the hotel, got a quick sleep in, and then I think that it was like a noon tip Pacific time or something like that. So quick turnaround, but just a microcosm example of how people, myself included, got much more into this tournament as Nebraska continued into it and the stakes got higher. And while, again, maybe some of the first round teams weren't at full strength, or Villanova, a semifinal team, fired their coach. But there are plenty of examples of teams that maybe didn't necessarily want to be there like Nebraska did. But I'll say it again, Nebraska can only do what their situation is and perform to the best of their ability. And that's what they were able to do in Vegas as they took the inaugural crown.
Yeah, and there's something to be said, obviously, Blake, with your experience going out there, but it seemed like to me, at least on the broadcast watching it, you could definitely tell that there was a lot more Husker red in that stadium or arena. You know, you look at the attendance numbers and it's only a couple thousand or whatever. It's not, sold out crowds, but a lot of that was Husker red. And that really goes to show, even when this team isn't what we thought it was going to be, there's always that support. There's that love for the squad. And, like we're talking about with the NIL and the transfer portal, maybe we don't have the money to sell some people, but I think that fan support is something that can go a long way with certain recruits. Jeff Nichols said, gonna party like it's 1996. Kelly Butts said, happy, may have shed a tear, meant a lot to this team and Husker Nation. I will not tolerate anyone making fun of this crown. Natalie Benoit said, the Gary Williams hug at the end got me, which I think anybody that saw that got a little choked up about that. And Jacob Wright, 27, said, these guys gave it everything to get this program back. The 3 and the 4 will always be remembered with a picture of said hug. And like I said, I did not get a chance to see this one live. I was in the air when they were playing it. But even knowing the result when we got to the end of the game and I saw Bryce and Juwan embrace like that, it's hard not to get emotional. I'm sure at points these guys felt like they were failing the team. We're not going to achieve our goal of getting to the NCAA tournament. This season is a bust. But even through all that, you could tell that they really loved and cared about this school, this team. And it's just great to see them go out as winners. I feel like it's repetitive. We're talking about these guys a lot, but really, truly, what they have done for this program can't be overstated because they've really put this Nebraska basketball program on an upward trajectory that we have not seen in a long time. And again, Bryce Williams and Juwan Gary are two of the best that we're going to have for a long time, I think.
Wrapping up the tweets, Ryan Melton says, I'm happy with it. Another 20-win season. We're building and sustaining some progress year after year now, moving in the right direction. Husker Trump says, I'm so happy for these players, coaches, and staff. They deserve this after the roller coaster of a season this has been. I'm so glad they decided to play in this tournament. No better way to send off these seniors. Go Big MF Red. Alex Abels says, I'm going to need some Scarlet Shoot-Around stickers because I'm putting them everywhere after this. Maybe an idea for us. What a fantastic way to end the season. Historic in every sense. So proud to be a Nebraska fan. Let's carry this momentum into next season and jumpstart this program. Thank you, seniors. And rounding it out, one of our favorites, 402 Nation, who says, no idea how people see the progress these players and program have made over the last few years and want the coach gone. A roller coaster of a season that ends with sending our seniors out the right way. Our program is better because of them, and I can't wait for November. And I go back again to what I talked about when we were getting into the NIL stuff. It's so healthy for a program to have guys that avoid going out and getting a huge money bag in the portal and stay and build something. And those are the kind of guys that Nebraska needs, if we're being honest, because they're just not going to be the highest bidder for a lot of guys that want to come to Nebraska or are searching for the bag or what have you. So to have guys that are willing to put the program over money and want to stay and build something is so vital and healthy for, again, a Nebraska program that, number one, hasn't had success, and number two, hasn't had a lot of guys that have impacted the program the way that they have.
Yeah, and I'll go back to, love Alex again. Thank you for all the support that everyone shows us. This whole section that, I've been rambling on for 30 minutes reading fan tweets. We couldn't do it without you guys. So thanks again for all the love and support there. Again, it's just so perfect that we go out the way we did. It's like I said, about building a culture. It's like I said, the fan support and seeing the Husker fans show up in the crowd. If you're a prospective recruit or a transfer portal guy, it may not mean a lot. The tournament may not mean a lot, but seeing the way the fans show up, I think does have an impact. Obviously, when it comes to fan support versus $250,000 or $1 million or whatever in NIL, it's only going to do so much. But I genuinely do think the love that the fans show for this team, the way they show up and support a team that, again, historically not great, but we still love this team. We're going to support it. I don't think that can be overstated. And we see that time and again from Husker fans. We always say, especially when it comes to football, best fans in the country, but it definitely goes beyond football. You look at what the volleyball and the volleyball day selling at Memorial Stadium, you see the way Husker fans travel, no matter where, one of the athletic teams is playing, you will see Husker fans in attendance, and that's not something to be taken for granted. So thanks again for the support for us, and I know the team feels the same way about the support that we all provided them. That'll do it for the Let's Hear For You segment. Loved this season, love doing this. Like I just said, thanks to all the fans for all the support. It's always great to be a sounding board for people to bounce their thoughts off of, to put it out there for everyone to hear, especially when we're going through the depths of a 6-game losing streak, just as much as when we're going through the highs of a 5-game winning streak. I think it helps a lot to get stuff off their chest and talk about something that we're all obviously very passionate about. Love doing this. Love the fan interaction. Yeah, I just feel really, really blessed, Blake. I don't know. I could ramble on for 10 minutes saying the same thing over and over, but it's amazing to me that we have the fan support we do. Always so thankful for it.
And save the rambling for the other side of the break, as after we conclude this final break, we will get into our farewells for the season and get into a postseason montage that we put together. We'll see you on the other side of the break.
You are listening to the Scarlet Shoot-Around Podcast.
Welcome back in again for the final time of the 2024-2025 Nebraska basketball season. We are sponsored, as always, by our friends Tax and Business Consultants. Normally, we're previewing an opponent, Mike, in this segment of the show, but there are no opponents left to preview, as this is going to be the final segment for this season. I think we both kind of wrote some little heartfelt notes that we want to give out to everybody, as this is a very big growth year for the podcast, as we're over, I think, 1.6 thousand followers. And you and I both know neither of us expected that to happen, especially on this quick of a timeline horizon. So we both have some thoughts we want to share, and I'll let Mike go first.
I think I said it last episode, I don't know how much is going to get cut from my rambling. So I'll just kind of say again, as Blake mentioned, the growth that we've seen over the last 2 years, and it's not about us or this podcast, the growth, whatever. It's more about the support. And we say it all the time, we just want to be a mouthpiece for the fan base. There's a lot of Nebraska basketball fans who have a lot of strong emotions. A lot of the time it's very frustrated emotions, understandable, when you go on multiple 5+ game losing streaks in a season like we did this year. But a lot of times it's also very happy emotions, and it's great to have somebody there to celebrate with you. I know personally in my life, my brother's a big fan. So, I'd talk to him about Nebraska basketball, but really that was, that's kind of it. I didn't have a ton of friends that are real big basketball fans. A lot of my friends are UNC or Duke or Kansas or what have you, because why would you want to cheer for a bad team? And so having Blake and myself having a chance to talk to each other about Nebraska basketball and now having it grow into this community, I think that's something really, really special. And just can't say thank you enough for all the support that we continue to receive. It is incredible, especially as I mentioned, the Husker basketball program goes through ups and downs, but the fan support has been unwavering for us. It is great reading the post-game tweets and seeing a lot of regulars. You see guys that we saw last year and starting this year, seeing a lot of new people that are replying to every tweet again. We're going to have to develop some way to go through these tweets better, Blake, because it can be a lot, but it's a good problem to have. And again, just always so thankful for all the support that you guys show us. And never thought it'd come to this, and here we are. And truthfully, it can be a bit of a grind during the season, but we get to the end and it's sad. And I'm ready for next season all over again, right? And luckily we got to go a little longer this season into April, but we'll be coming back, with a season preview, maybe a portal episode soon. But until then, it's been a great season, and love you guys for all the support. Say that every sentence here on the way out, but I truly do mean it. It means the world to us. So.
Now, doing this podcast, I feel like, is almost writing the chapters of each Nebraska basketball story. And as Mike talked about, we got into this to connect with other Nebraska basketball diehards, and it has grown to levels that we could have never imagined. And we are so beyond thankful for all of the continued support and interaction that we've had since day one. This started as a passion project for me and Mike that we looked at each other one day and said, let's just do it. And again, it has turned into something so much more than that after meeting many of you even in person that have listened to us. And as Mike talked about, we have always wanted to give a voice to those who maybe don't have someone to talk about Nebraska basketball to, because either they don't have many friends that are fans of the program, or frankly, they're even embarrassed to talk about it, as there's not usually a lot to talk about in a good sense. But I want this to be very well aware that if you are a hardcore Nebraska basketball fan, we see you, we hear you, and most importantly, we love you. And thank you all for listening all year. And again, the continued support in the post-game tweets and all that kind of stuff. Me and Mike have talked about a couple things that we might do going into next year. Don't want to spoil anything yet, but we have some big ideas, and hopefully we can execute them properly. And it's been a really fun year. And thank you all for listening. It's been a special ride, and we'll see you going into next year. Stay with us after we check out for our postseason audio montage. But for now, until next year, for myself, Blake, and co-host Mike, go Big Red.
Go Big Red, baby.
Everybody, and welcome to University of Nebraska basketball. Kent Pavelka along with Jake Muehlheisen as the Huskers of Nebraska begin the 2024-2025 basketball season. A home game against
the Nebraska Cornhuskers have come to Omaha and stunned their in-state rival. Number 14 Creighton falls 74-63 to Nebraska. And the championship in Honolulu on Christmas night, the 15th annual Hawaiian Airlines belongs to the Nebraska Cornhuskers, 78-66 over Oregon State.
Rooster, that's going to be the game. Nebraska wins it. What an afternoon of Husker basketball on Alumni Weekend. Nebraska knocks off 15th ranked UCLA, posts its 20th straight home floor victory, 66-58.
This was the first of 3 consecutive top 25 net opponents, and Nebraska going to have to go back to the drawing board.
Wisconsin dribbles it out, and a dominant win on their home floor today. The Badgers hit 17 threes in an 83-55 demolition of the Nebraska Cornhuskers. And the Hawkeyes have done it. They've come into Lincoln. They upset Nebraska, and Iowa is on to the Big Ten tournament in Indianapolis.
And welcome to University of Nebraska basketball. Kent Pavelka, Jake Muehlheisen. We are in Las Vegas, Nevada for a Nebraska game against the Arizona State Sun Devils. Comes left, flips to Gary. Gary drives it, has it swatted away. Williams winds up with it to Siege and puts it up. Got it! Bang! And it's 58 apiece.
Here's Bryce Williams, who's been electric in this tournament. Pushes off, pull-up jumper, 20-footer, count it. Big-time player, folks. outlet. Williams on the move to the cup. You're up and in. Rogers leading the game for Big Red. Big step through. No. Mia. Ow! The reverse two-hand wham.
With a basketball up top. Chomp playing drop defense. No pressure on him. Morgan hands it off. A Seaton Square shoots the three. Got it! Bang! Harang! Another three for the Cornhuskers.
Bryce Williams. Bounce back. Baseline. Jam with two hands. Andrew Morgan.
Came down from 14 up by 2. Here's a drive and another dunk. Back-to-back flushes. 2 paws by Morgan. Assist by Williams. Nebraska's up by 4.
So with the offense as well.
Ezekiel. Again, and again. Connor Ezekiel is white hot.
Out it comes to Jacobson. Puts it up and in. Holy smokes. Way to go, Cale. Cale Jacobson from Ashland, Nebraska.
And that will do it. And the first winners ever, Big Red. Champions of the college basketball crowd.
And when I was out for sure, like Bryce said, the one thing we wanted to do our last game of the season was to win. And that was what we did today. You know, we won a championship today. So, you know, down the line, the next 4 to 3 years for sure, like, we're going to come back to Nebraska and people going to know who we were, you know, who his team were, like, crown basketball champions. And that's something that will be in my heart for sure.